Hello and welcome everybody to the Poker Fuse podcast. It's March 19th, 2020. This is episode number 46. I am your host, Mike Gentili, along with my co-host, Nick Jones. Live poker is quickly becoming a thing of the past. We'll update you on the factors that may impact the return of live poker events, including the World Series of Poker and the PSPC. In this time of social distancing, online poker is once again becoming all the rage. We'll update you on the new state of the online poker world and tell you what online poker operators are doing to meet the increased demand. And finally, PokerStars has another new game. We'll get you the details on Swap Hold'em and discuss some of the ways that the game is different from the other novelty variants previously rolled out by PokerStars. Any conversation about poker needs to start with the coronavirus, otherwise known as COVID-19. We've seen a large number of cancellations, and we expect that to continue into the future. Nick, what do we know about live poker events currently?
Yeah, I mean, any conversation about anything is starting with a discussion about coronavirus, isn't it? I mean, we're at that point now where it's redundant to just list everything that's cancelled in poker or anything. I mean, everything is at a distance which people are confident to predict. The only reason some stuff isn't cancelled, I imagine, is it's too far out and people are hopeful that they'll be able to run. So, obviously, this is a poker podcast, so we'll talk about online poker, although it feels a little bit trivial to be discussing it. But yeah, I mean, all live events are cancelled over obviously the next 6 weeks to 2 months, I think, is kind of the horizon that we're looking at. I would expect things beyond that also to be cancelled. Decisions haven't been made. Like we talked about this last week, and we were saying that everything was cancelled. There's a few notable ones that have come out only because they were trying to hold out and not be cancelled. I think the most notable one was EPT Sochi, which PokerStars was still hoping to run. It was going to be now. I think it was going to start last Friday, and run through to the end of this week. They cancelled it 3 days out, which is very short notice, and at a point where I think everyone was surprised they were still trying to run it. I'm guessing with Russia, they haven't been impacted so badly. They haven't had the restrictions that some of Europe has seen. And on the assumption that everyone who was going to be Russian, it might still be worth hosting. And I also wonder, this is my speculation, that it might have been a little bit trickier for operators to cancel it just with the deal that they might have with the resort, with the Sochi resort, just because PokerStars was cancelling other events further afield. So it just seems odd that one was still going. But that has been cancelled, to say, a couple of days before it was going to start. They've rescheduled it, I think, for October time, I believe.
Yeah, so what we did see is we saw some restrictions come down on Moscow, but I didn't see anything particular to Sochi when it comes to social or live gatherings. And I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing a lot of operators that are trying to make decisions, but they also have to make those in conjunction with, government authorities. And from a PR standpoint, sometimes it could be better to allow the government to step in and close things down rather than the operator coming out and canceling it. And maybe that's not better. I don't know, but I think that this particular period can provide some opportunities for the online poker operators and live poker operators to shine from a PR perspective. There's a lot of opportunities for them to endear themselves to their customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have seen some of that. One of the first out of the gates was Unibet. Were going to host their Tallinn stop in Estonia. They decided to move that online. And we've seen a few others also moving online. The Irish Poker Open, which traditionally runs in Dublin, Ireland, that has been running every year for 40 years, something like that. I think they call themselves Europe's longest running poker festival. That's moved onto the Party Poker platform. So Party Poker is doing quite a lot actually to pick up some of the cancellations and rehost some of these events online. So we're definitely seeing a trend there.
Yeah, I think a lot of, even outside of poker, a lot of people are saying on social media that, this is the time where they're going to take note of how companies react, through their customer service, through their public relations. So there's a great opportunity for poker operators here. I think, one that stands out to me right now is WSOP. So they haven't come out and officially canceled the World Series of Poker. But effectively, it has been because all of the casinos are shut down in Nevada. Now, whether or not that continues on and through the end of May, it's hard to say for sure. But with travel restrictions only looking to move into a greater area, it's really hard to imagine that they will be able to operate this year.
Yeah, so it's just over 2 months away, the start of it. So I suppose that's just outside the kind of horizon that we're looking at in terms of cancellations. But as you say, I saw something put out by the American Gaming Association the last couple of days. They said that 94% of the country's casinos have shut their doors. It's impacted 96% of the casino workforce. The only ones that I think, the reason why it's not 100% are there's some tribal casinos that have remained open. But and you say, and that's just across the world. And again, so that's why it just feels silly to kind of list everything that's cancelled, because just everything is shut. And obviously not just casinos, but, everything. And so, yeah, I mean, the WSP, I guess, hasn't announced yet, but even only the absolutely most optimistic estimates that I think thinks that anything will be back to normal in 2 months' time. I mean, it just seems blindly hopeful that that's the case. And even if things did open again in 2 months' time, I don't think everyone's going to be jumping on a plane to fly to Las Vegas. So I guess it's more a case, behind the scenes of them trying to put together an alternative that they want to announce at the same time. And there's been some hints there. There was Rob Young of Party Poker GVC did a long podcast with Jerry Ingram, and he's suggested that they have thrown their hat in the ring to host some WSOP online events for them, and that is apparently being considered. So there are potential options there, and I wouldn't be surprised if when we hear the cancellation plan, it comes with the alternative online version.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit skeptical about that actually taking place. As you know, they already have an online partner in 888. So there could be significant restrictions there as far as them branding through one of 888's competitors. With regard to the online bracelet events, the number of events have skyrocketed in recent years, and they were looking to have a record number this year as well. But those are restricted to only players in the U.S., number one, and even within the U.S., only in Nevada and New Jersey. Yeah, it's hard to see that they'd be able to do something worldwide or internationally at this point.
I mean, maybe we'll see something like, as you say, they had 11 bracelet events were to be hosted online this year, 11 of 101, I think. So, we're looking at just over 10% there. Maybe they'll just run like another 10 with a global provider. Again, 888 would be the obvious choice because obviously they do have an exclusive partnership with them. But, Rob did seem to indicate that there was potential that they might nab that. Maybe they'll host, 10 with 888 and Winamax as well. They work with them in the French-Spanish market, and Winamax has been satelliting people into the main event. So maybe they'll run, a few events there for French-Spanish players and then call it a day there with, 25 online bracelet events available. But as you say, the weird thing there is that the main people who can't play are the 48 states in the United States who don't have access, where everyone else does, which is odd for a festival that's so US focused. So there's no good solution here for them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think one alternative could be to postpone it. It's possible that things could be better in the fall, for example. The logistics of doing so are definitely going to be difficult, but given the state of the Rio currently, I'd be surprised if the WSOP doesn't have the numbers or the potential numbers to come in and get a space that they're able to hold at least a scaled down version in later in the year. That could be an option. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good idea. I think the difficulty there is, we've seen a few people say like, okay, this is going to be hosted in October, but it's just so much guesswork at the moment about whether anything will be back to normal. I mean, that idea, I think in principle is fantastic, because when restrictions do start to lift, I think there's going to be just socially and economically a lot of friction about people moving again and spending again and traveling and that kind of thing. So a big event like the World Series of Poker to get people back to Vegas, back into the hotels, back into the hospitality is a fantastic idea. But I think the difficulty they've got is just announcing it and saying it'll be October or it'll be November. It is perhaps a bit early to be, putting a date on it, but I think it's a good idea in principle for sure.
Yeah, and that time frame is still in question, which then makes us look at what other events have not yet been canceled. And there's a list that are scheduled to take place in July and August, and most notably the PSPC that we have not heard yet an official word on.
Yeah, that's the big one. And for PokerStars, they only have 3 European Poker Tour stops this year. Monte Carlo was cancelled. Sochi was just cancelled 3 days before. And then there's EPT Barcelona in August, which includes the PSPC. They've already and continue to give away platinum passes to this event, to the tune of $5 million, $6 million worth of tickets. I can't see, and their official statement is, and they've been very responsive to our inquiries, and it's just as everyone is, honestly. But it's ultimately, they're monitoring it as it stands right now. They hope it can still go ahead, but we will see what happens. And there's nothing else you can say in my mind, and I think in most people's minds, it seems highly unlikely that Spain will be opening its doors again come August.
Yeah, that's almost a certainty not to happen, actually, just based on some of the news that's coming out of places in Spain, like Madrid, where they're expecting that 80% of the population is going to be infected. It's hard to imagine that things will be in the clear. That's soon. And it feels weird in March to say that soon when talking about August.
Yeah, but as you say, we've got politicians now saying these lockdowns are going to last 6 months, and you assume they're giving you an optimistic side of things rather than a overly pessimistic one. And I think, guessing here, but behind the scenes, to make these announcements, you have deals in place with companies. You make commitments to them to be filling up hotels, to be filling up casinos, these kinds of things. So I guess things have to happen in a certain order. Announcements need to be made and deadlines set before you can, trigger a clause in a contract or trigger a clause in an insurance contract or these kinds of things to make the announcement. So that's why I think we're seeing like this 6-week, 2-month horizon, because that is, the guaranteed no one's doing anything over that period. And as that horizon moves forward, we'll see more and more cancellations, which is tough, obviously, because some people have got travel plans, people have won tickets, staff are making plans to get there. And, until these announcements, everything's basically just static until these announcements can be made.
Well, hopefully we'll see things clear up on the virus side, and that will then allow some of the poker operators to start making plans, even if that's in the fall or in the early winter. I think that will help boost people's morale, give them something to look forward to. On the other end of the spectrum, there's the online game. And while we've seen tons of cancellations on the live scene, online poker has really started to explode since people have been staying home.
Yeah, so on the podcast last week, I think you suggested that we might see that, a big spike in traffic online, and I was somewhat cautious about what we might see. I was proven wrong by that within about minutes of stopping recording with you. Checking the online poker traffic and already seeing in Italy, which was one of the first in Europe to have a kind of nationwide lockdown and traffic surging there. And now we've seen it globally. Unprecedented numbers of people are in the online poker tables, cash games and tournaments across almost every market, across almost every operator. We're seeing over the last week, 20, 30, 40% growth in cash game traffic. I mean, markets like Italy is like a 4-year high for cash game activity. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that in a lot of the European operators too over the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely something to be optimistic for, or it definitely gives people an outlet while they're locked in the house. But it's also I'm a little leery as how long is this sustainable with the economy being in such jeopardy, let's call it. It's hard to imagine that there's going to be that disposable income that people are going to continue to be able to entertain themselves with online gaming.
Yeah, that's it. And I think a lot of our listeners will be professional, semi-professional players or in the industry. And obviously it's a fantastic time for them if games are busier, and the games are busier with lots of new players. The reality is 95% of people that are now coming to the tables are looking for entertainment, are casual players. And as you say, it can absolutely be an entertainment outlet for a lot of people. And a fun thing to do. You know, we're looking at Sundays. We look back at last Sunday, huge turnout to the MTTs. You can buy into a tournament for, $10, euros, 50, 100, and, be playing poker for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. It's a great, thing to do if you're stuck at home a lot, for the foreseeable future. As you say, long term with economically, personally, a lot of people facing some tough times. This is not potentially sustainable for the long term.
Yeah, I saw that you had posted a poll on Twitter asking people that are at the tables, do they find them to be more fishy, more tough? What have been some of the results so far?
Yeah, so it's only been up an hour, but I think there's been like 60 votes. And of all the people who've given an opinion, because I think the largest one is people wanting to see the results and not have an opinion.
That was me.
Yeah, but I think like of the 30 people who have voted, all but 1 or 2 have voted that the games are fishier than they were before. So, which is not surprising, I suppose. And again, being that we've seen it across the board, like even the smaller operators are seeing that kind of traffic. So we're seeing people, casual people who might only play at the weekends now, play during the week, now play in the evenings on weekdays. And yeah, it's quite incredible to see. I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. US markets, the US regulated markets, seeing huge growth. I won't go through them all, but we're like, 20-30% just up in the last week, and all the major operators.
All right. And another thing that we're seeing some increases in guarantees. We're seeing, I think PokerStars advanced or moved up the PA Coop in Pennsylvania, for example, and NJ Coop. They're making moves to try and accommodate the increase in demand.
Yeah. And again, operators have to be careful here. You don't want the PR of being seeming to like profiteer from these opportunities. Right. But on the flip side, ultimately, these sites provide a service and they want to be meeting that service. And we've got a lot of people turning out. You want to be promising them, big guarantees. So if you want to play poker this Sunday, we guarantee that the prize pool is going to be this large. And we're seeing that, but it's somewhat modest. So as you say, Party Poker have increased their Power Fest guarantees, but they haven't gone, okay, it's $20 million was the series guarantee, which is fairly modest for them. We didn't see them go, right, it's going to be 30 million or 40 million. But they are incrementally increasing them daily to the point that maybe on reflection it'll be 30 million. We're seeing the GG Masters, they met their guarantee for the first time, I think last Sunday or the week before. They've upped the guarantee on that now to a 400k event. This Sunday in particular is going to be huge. It was going to be huge anyway. PokerStars have got their anniversary Sunday million, $12.5 million guaranteed. That's the largest online poker tournament ever held. The largest PokerStars have ever held. Of course, the Party Poker have done their 20 million guaranteed millions online. But outside of that, it's the largest guarantee ever put on an online poker tournament. Definitely the largest at PokerStars. That plus we've got the Power Fest, the GG Masters. 888 have got $1 million guarantee this coming Sunday as well, their Storm. So it's going to be pretty unprecedented this weekend.
Yeah, and with all of the opportunities for good PR, there's also, as you mentioned earlier, the risks with PR as well, looking as if they're taking advantage of a dire situation. But I think upping guarantees, I don't think it goes there. I think that upping guarantees shows a positive front for for poker operators. Expanding schedules, maybe not as much, but still, I don't get the feeling that it's a negative from a PR standpoint.
Yeah, I think the tournaments and the guarantees is always safe, isn't it? Because it's just, it's just saying, hey, if we don't get the customer traffic, we're just going to be paying out more out of our own pocket. What we probably won't see are big like deposit bonuses and reload bonuses, I would say. I think that's something that companies be careful to shy away from. But yeah, the tournaments is always a good way to do it. PokerStars is also running their birthday celebrations, which is just like extra money, free money in the rewards chests, that kind of thing. And yeah, so I think, and again, the guarantees, it's very much like that's their meeting demand rather than trying to push it or generate it. But, something that we're going to see with all these online poker companies is that the vast majority are generate much more money, or did generate a lot more money from sports betting. And obviously, sports betting has just stopped overnight. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry that literally the light was turned off a few days ago. And these companies will need to show their investors that they can still generate revenue over the next few months under that situation. There is going to be no US sports, European sports all summer. I think that's pretty fair to say. Right. I saw this, some companies are starting offering Bet365, I think is offering bets on like virtual FIFA games, and, the women's under 21 somewhere in Iran or something like that. There's very few sporting events running. And so poker is the natural opportunity for customers who've got a wallet online to offer them something else if they want to continue to, game, real money game online. So they will have that push and pull of, they will obviously have clear financial pressures, as all industries do. And they've got a product that is, much better than before to offset a product which no longer exists anymore. But they have to be careful, I think, to be seen to, push people too much into a product they weren't using.
Right. And I think that's where poker really has the opportunity to shine. If you look at, so as you mentioned, sports is a big, big part of the revenue for a lot of these online gaming companies. The other thing beside poker is casino games. And when we're talking about from a PR standpoint, it feels like they can safely push or promote poker, whereas doing so on the casino side might seem a bit more taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, and this goes back to, Poker Industry Pro's fantastic and still very relevant report written 3 years ago, the online poker difference, which, enumerates all these things which are really going to shine over the next few months, which is, poker is the complete package in terms of a gaming experience. You've got, Twitch streamers, you've got strategy, you did have live events, you've got a peer-to-peer competitive game where the smarter, more skillful people win. And so that's just a very different picture than casino gaming, and it's closer even to sports betting. Again, like sports betting can be pitched by some operators as a skillful endeavor. And poker is unquestionably that, and bar a few examples, very much any game can still be beaten online. And so yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fascinating time. And just talking about things like Twitch streaming, I mean, that's going to explode over the next couple of months, right? I mean, it's any kind of at-home entertainment experience. I mean, Netflix must be, readying for 2, 3, 4 times the regular bandwidth that they have to support. And so Twitch will be there, poker will be there, and it can be there to provide entertainment with things like the Galfond Challenge, which is back and happening and as exciting as it ever was. Playing online poker, sweating online poker on Twitch, that will all be there. And it's important that operators seize that opportunity whilst providing the service rather than exploiting them for very short-term revenue gain.
What do you think about the potential Achilles heel, if you will, of online poker? You had mentioned Netflix earlier, and I've seen reports where governments are stepping in and asking Netflix to dial back some of the quality of their videos for fear that they are going to be overwhelmed with, going to overwhelm the backbone of the internet with so many people working from home and being confined to their houses. Is that a concern? Have we seen disruptions in online poker over the last week or so?
I mean, not from like an infrastructure like server point of view, although to be honest, I'm not sure if online poker in general is in a super strong position in terms of that. I think the Sunday before last, there was downtime across PokerStars and Party Poker, I believe. So like that can always happen, but we're not, unless traffic is like goes like 10x or something, there really shouldn't be a reason. It's already extremely spiky. That's the thing. Like PokerStars has to be confident that it can host a $12.5 million poker tournament. Your average traffic right now is not going to be exceeding that. So they should have the backbone to support that. Am I going to say like there's not going to be problems with online poker services in the next couple of weeks? Absolutely not, because it's rare that we go a month without having something go on somewhere, but it should be fine, I think, from a tech standpoint, in principle, at least.
Yeah, the bigger companies, I'm not so worried about it. They have built the ability to scale. It's maybe some of the smaller operators that haven't experienced such surges in traffic that, who knows how well prepared they are to weather that storm.
Yeah, I mean, it should, it's not like Running One's Poker is going to go from 100 concurrent players, 200 concurrent players to 10,000 tomorrow. Like, there's going to be a ramp. So the only question there is if they, and this is the thing whenever we talk about this, and in any industry, you talk about companies as a global entity, but of course companies are just stating the obvious here, made up of people, many of those people who can't get into work, who might be ill themselves, who might have kids to care for and that kind of thing. And I think right the first section you were saying it's an opportunity for companies to show how good they are for customer support and that kind of thing, and you're absolutely right, but it's also at a time where huge numbers of their customer support staff are going to struggle doing the job that they were doing a month ago. And so I think the thing is, like, let's say a smaller company needs to scale up and support more customers. Are their tech teams still in the offices? Can they still get their, backbone ISP on the phone to troubleshoot for them? Can they still get the DDoS protection that they were getting before? These are the big unknowns on anything. We just don't know how the global system economy is going to handle this thing, because we're just going to see a massive spike in all these at-home entertainment services, and I don't think anyone knows whether they're going to be able to provide under these strange conditions.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point. It's not just the scalability of the online poker software and the infrastructure. It's also the scalability of the customer support, which will have a very big impact on the forward-facing part of the online poker operators, and their ability to handle the requests of their customers is really going to be something that's under a magnifying glass, I think, over the next couple of months.
It will be interesting also to see if there are many people out there who may be laid off from their work, or I think your US term is a furlough, isn't it? That's when people's throat like put in a freeze. Yeah,
layoff is more widely used, I think.
Like an ex-poker pros thinking like, I'll get back and be a poker professional. Like, I'll get back to grinding. And this maybe, a lot behind the surge in traffic. Although, again, that's why I started the poll asking people whether they're seeing their games fish yet. Because if you're just seeing a lot of people getting back, grinding and playing, playing good poker, that wouldn't be the case. Although maybe if you're a pro from 5 years ago, you're now the fish and your ABC poker doesn't quite cut it these days. Yeah, anyway, it all just comes back to, morbidly fascinating time to see what's going to happen in the online poker industry over the next couple of months. How about we finish off the podcast with something that is not coronavirus related?
Okay, what will that be?
So, PokerStars have launched a new game. Real money game. It's available in the UK, I believe, only at the moment, but obviously we expect it to roll out globally, and that is, drumroll, Swap Hold'em, which I believe is something we would have talked about in this podcast like 6 months ago.
Yeah, we've seen hints that it was coming. This is not brand new. We didn't know a lot of the details at the time that we first saw it, but the details are out, and it looks quite interesting.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I actually think when we discussed what Swap Hold'em might be, how it might play, I didn't guess this. And it's clearly the most obvious thing in retrospect. So I think we guessed like maybe you can swap a card with somebody else or swap a flop or something like that. It's much more straightforward than that. It's Hold'em, everything exactly the same, except at one point in the hand, before you act, you can decide to swap out one or two of your whole cards. You swap them out face down and get dealt one or two more cards. You can do that at any point in the hand, but you can only do it once, and that's it.
Right. The surprising thing to me is that you can do it all the way to the river.
Yeah, and this makes it fascinating. It is, I think, most notably, like this was one of the skills in Power Up, which it was PokerStars' pretty complicated poker hybrid game where you had these different power cards and you could play them, and they would have. Sorry, they weren't power cards, were they? They were.
Yeah, no, I think they were power cards. No, or was that the other game?
I think that was the other game. You got powers, and you could play them. You generated these points, and you could play them, and they give you a special power at the table. One of them was being able to swap out your whole cards. So they've taken that one element and made a whole game around it, basically.
Yeah, so some of the key points are that players can swap either one of their whole cards or both of their whole cards for free. You're not charged to do so. You can do it once per hand, and in order for you to fold, another interesting twist, you must swap your cards. So you can check or bet or raise, but in order to fold, you have to swap.
And I guess that's just to protect people from making a huge mistake. Obviously, you'd never want to fold without, swapping your cards. Cards could maybe swap them out and get dealt two aces or get dealt the nuts, So I'm guessing that's just kind of a player protection mechanism for people who don't realize what the game is, who might just like auto fold. But yeah, like we've seen with PokerStars games, and this is like the 8th or 9th twist on Hold'em that we've seen over the last 2-3 years from PokerStars. The way it's implemented is pretty slick. It uses the new Aurora graphics engine. In fact, you have to have Aurora enabled to play this game. It's Aurora only, and they're actually removing the ability to turn off this new game engine. But if you're playing it, like, the visual effects are very cool, swirling graphics in the background, customized sound effects, that kind of thing. And they've customized, obviously, the bet and fold buttons. You've got check boxes to auto swap out a card when it gets to you, that kind of thing. So very nicely implemented. They've obviously been waiting 5-6 months testing this to launch it. They've done it pretty quietly, UK first, and I think at the time of us recording this, it's still only in the UK, but I would expect this to go pretty wide. And I would say this is one of the most interesting of their novelty games that they've launched.
You think this one's got legs and can last, huh?
I think so. I think what's good about it is that it's very easy to explain, but I think the strategy is very complicated. I mean, I started playing it and had literally no idea what I was meant to do, what's correct to do, and you just have to start thinking from scratch about, if you've played Power Up, and talking to people who have played Power Up when it was available, obviously that game was removed back in November time, you will be probably instantly familiar with this because it was one of the key powers in the game. So they're going to have a big advantage in the strategy, but even then I imagine the strategy was fairly thin compared with obviously where people are with classic no limit hold'em. So the decision of when you should swap out your card, how late you should leave it, the bluffing opportunities of swapping out a card early and late, all these things are new. So it's one of these classic instantly to explain, will take a long time for you to work out how best you want to use this new skill.
Yeah, one of the things that jumps out at me that could impact strategy quite a bit is bet sizing and pot sizing. You certainly don't want to be uber aggressive early when the player has the opportunity to swap their whole cards, later in the hand. That to me jumps out as a particularly poignant part of the strategy that could be very different with a game like this.
Yeah, I think everyone's ranges are wider, I guess, because you can obviously manipulate your hand. I guess I'm just thinking out loud, but hands that can work both ways are going to be really good, right? So if you've got like a Jack 10 suited or something like that, that is a hand that can play multiple ways, because if you don't hit your connectors and suits, you can swap that out and swap out one or both of those cards. So you swap out if you got Jack 10 and swap out the 10 and go for a higher top pair type hand. It's the kind of thing that can really improve using that swappability on the flop going onwards. So anyway, yeah, this is me talking absolute fish strategy here, thinking off the top of my head. But
all right, I got some fish strategy for you. What do you think about this? So blockers become a lot more important, right? Because you know that even if they do swap their whole cards, that they have less of a chance of being able to connect with the board.
Mm-hmm. I also wonder whether they experimented with like an open version of this, where if you swap out a card, it's shown face up.
Huh. Wow. Yeah. That releases a whole lot of information now.
Yeah, that was it. It would really narrow down the range of what cards somebody would have, and that would be fascinating. Maybe that's something they can do. Again, I'm probably saying this out loud and someone's listening and going, Nick, that's absolutely stupid, that wouldn't work. And very much that's the case. But just right now, we're in what is now going to be fish strategy section of the Poker Fuse podcast. That sounds like a pretty cool twist. So so when you look at some of the other ones, like Split Hold'em, fine. Showtime Hold'em, fine. Like, I don't know, this one seems really interesting to me. It also just seems, I mean, I can't believe that this hasn't been done before. Maybe it has. Maybe it's something that people play at home games. But I'll be honest, I've never heard of it. And when we even talked about Swap Hold'em, I'm not sure if we even contemplated this exact implementation of card swapping. I don't know.
Yeah, in my mind, it would be perhaps swapping your whole cards, after the flop at the very latest, or maybe even just pre-flop. I didn't envision that you'd be able to get to the river and still be able to change your hand that dramatically.
Yeah.
So one of the games, the novelty games from PokerStars that has, or I should say the only one that has returned, has been Fusion. And it strikes me that, looking up and down the list, Tempest, for example, Unfold, those, I didn't see a lot of buzz around some of those, though I believe that Tempest is still available.
So this is the thing. So I actually liked both Deepwater Hold'em and Tempest Hold'em, where they're the same, except Tempest is like an all-in off-fold version,
right?
With shorter stacks. But the game is basically, there's a third blind, right? There's the giant blind, which is live. I think that's the one twist. So it's just like a deeper stacked Hold'em. Fine. But then they canned Deepwater and kept Tempest, which I can only think they looked at metrics and saw that it was generating the money and generating enough liquidity to make it worthwhile. It's more like a super quick, pretty high rake game, so it was kind of a shame from my perspective that was the one that stuck around. Obviously 6+ Hold'em, if you include it in this category of novelty Hold'em games, which is debatable, that obviously launched over a year ago and is still around. As you say, Fusion came back for a second run, but that's probably short term. And now we've got this. So it'd be interesting to see if this one sticks around as well, alongside Tempest and 6+, because it's a pretty busy lobby now for PokerStars in terms of cash games.
Yeah, one of the things that stands out for me for this particular game is I think it will have a larger appeal to recreational players. You look at something like, you were describing Deepwater and Tempest. Those type of betting strategies and pot strategies can be lost on some recreational players. And then you have things like Fusion, which is incorporating Hold'em and Omaha together, where I think that something like Swap Hold'em, it feels like recreational players will enjoy the opportunity to hit that long ball, that home run on the end, to try anything they can to win that big pot.
Yeah, and I think also it's just a game that with one rule change changes every street and your strategy throughout, where something like Deepwater Hold'em was literally just a pre-flop change. Once you're at the flop, the pot might be larger, but if you've got a normal Hold'em strategy that can handle 3-bet pots or 4-bet pots, you're just implementing that. I can't quite remember how Fusion worked. It was started to Hold'em, but then became PLO, or the other way around.
Yeah, one of those. I'm not even sure. There's that. There's Split Hold'em, which with the multiple boards. There's Unfold, which I think had a little bit of appeal for recreational players. Always wanting to get back in the game. I'm not sure. It seems like this one could be appealing, but I guess only time is really going to tell us.
Yeah. So that's Swap Hold'em. Only live in the UK, and I think maybe the .NET client for free play if you wanted to give it a test. But I would be very surprised if in the next week it wasn't live across the global .com.eu market, and we might even see it in some of the segregated markets as well. So do keep your eyes on that in the PokerStars client.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the PokerFuse podcast. As a reminder, please give us a like and a subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also follow us and interact with us on Twitter. Nick is at PokerProJones. I'm at SpookyBugs. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.